Welcome. Today we're doing a deep dive into alexithymia. It's really about how we understand emotions, both our own and maybe other people's too.
Exactly. We're looking at some key questions to get a handle on what it is, how it affects people, and, well, why it's important to understand.
Okay, so let's jump right in. What is alexithymia at its core?
Well, simply put, it's a real difficulty with identifying feelings and then describing those feelings to yourself or others.
A difficulty identifying. So it's not like someone doesn't have emotions.
No, not necessarily. It's more that they struggle to recognize what the emotion is when they feel it. And putting it into words is tough.
Right, like being unable to read your own emotional signals clearly.
Yeah.
So how do researchers actually assess this? Is there like a test or...
There isn't one single diagnostic test, no. But researchers use certain scales, questionnaires,
Questionnaires? What do they ask?
They ask about your ability to recognize feelings,
Oh.
talk about them. Often they touch on something called externally oriented thinking.
Externally oriented thinking.
Yeah, basically focusing a lot on external events and facts rather than internal states, internal feelings.
Okay. So if you have trouble pinpointing your own feelings, how does that play out day to day in terms of just your own emotional awareness?
It makes a big difference. Someone with alexithymia might feel their heart racing, for example, but they might not connect that physical thing to feeling anxious or maybe excited.
Ah, so the link between the physical sensation and the label, the emotion, is weak.
Precisely. Differentiating between emotions becomes really difficult. Is this nervousness? Is it anger? Is it something else? It's hard to tell.
And I guess if you can't really identify it for yourself, telling someone else how you feel must be pretty challenging.
Absolutely. Communicating those feelings becomes a major hurdle. If you can't label it internally, how do you explain it externally?
Right, which must affect relationships and social stuff.
Definitely. It can create misunderstandings and make it harder to build that close, empathetic connection.
This makes me think. You know how people talk about stress making you sick? Is there any connection between this difficulty processing emotions and, like, physical health problems?
That's a really interesting area. There is research suggesting a link between alexithymia and what we call psychosomatic symptoms.
Psychosomatic. So physical symptoms may be caused by emotional stuff.
Kind of. The idea, or one theory, is that if emotions aren't processed or expressed verbally, that energy, that stress might manifest physically instead. Headaches, stomach issues, that sort of thing.
Huh. Okay. And I've also heard alexithymia mentioned sometimes in relation to autism spectrum disorders. What's the connection there?
Yeah, there's a known overlap. A significant number of individuals on the autism spectrum also show traits of alexithymia.
So they're linked, but not the same thing.
Exactly. They're distinct conditions, but the challenges with social communication and emotional understanding that could be part of ASD might contribute to difficulties identifying and expressing feelings, which looks like alexithymia.
Makes sense. What about difficult life experiences? Could trauma play a role?
Yes, definitely. There's research linking a history of trauma with higher rates of alexithymia.
How so? Like a coping mechanism?
It could be, yeah. As a way to cope with overwhelming emotions from trauma, someone might sort of shut down their connection to those feelings, making them harder to access later on.
Wow. Okay. So shifting gears a bit, what's happening in the brain? Do we know which parts are involved when someone has alexithymia?
We're learning more through brain imaging. Studies suggest differences in activity in certain areas, places like the prefrontal cortex, which helps manage emotions,
Okay.
and also areas like the amygdala and the insula, which are really key for like feeling emotions and bodily awareness. They seem to function a bit differently.
So it affects the brain's emotion processing centers, which brings us back to relationships. If you struggle with identifying and expressing feelings, that's got to be tough on connecting with people.
It really can be. Empathy, understanding where someone else is coming from emotionally, and sharing your own feelings, that's all harder if you have alexithymia. It can lead to, well, friction and distance.
Yeah, I can see that. So for therapists, what are the challenges when working with someone who has alexithymia? Therapy often involves talking about feelings, right?
It does, and that's the core challenge. Traditional talk therapy might need some adaptation. The therapist might need to help the client first build a vocabulary for emotions, maybe connecting them to physical sensations.
So starting with the body almost, like where do you feel that tension?
Exactly. Focusing on bodily sensations, concrete experiences, and then slowly linking those to emotional words and concepts. It requires different techniques.
But is it possible to improve? Can someone with alexithymia learn to get better at this? Maybe through things like mindfulness?
There's definitely potential for change for some people. Practices like mindfulness, which encourages paying attention to present moment experiences, including bodily sensations. That can help
Yeah.
by building that awareness of internal states. Emotional intelligence training, too, can sometimes help people learn to better recognize and understand emotions in themselves and others. So yes, there's hope for improvement.
That's good to hear. One last area. Are there any broader patterns? Like, does it show up differently across cultures or between genders?
The research is still evolving, but there are some suggestions of variation. Some studies hint at potentially higher rates in men in some Western cultures, for instance, but it's complex. Cultural norms around emotional expression definitely play a role, too. It's not uniform.
Right. Context matters.
hmm
So, wrapping this up, what's the big takeaway for you listening? Alexithymia really highlights this intricate link, doesn't it, between our thoughts, our physical selves, and how we relate to each other.
hmm Understanding it even a little gives us insight into just how complex our inner worlds are and how differently people might experience and express them.
Yeah, and it makes you think, given this difficulty some people have in pinpointing emotions, maybe focusing on really clear, direct communication in all our interactions could benefit everyone, regardless of how easily they process feelings, something to consider.